Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm your host, Zach.
And I'm Steven, and if you can't see the video, I am holding Warhammer Champions cards because
Non-stop.
it's the most recent obsession of my life and many of us here at Covenant. So we're going to dive into that for quite a bit of time. Then we're going to answer some questions from the audience that cover a lot of non-Champions things.
A lot of questions, actually.
So stick around or fast forward if you're not into Champions, but if you don't, you will be before the end of this cast. So I traded for Ryan's Aspect of the Sea.
Traded or purchased?
I bought it. He $20? It's crazy.
All right, so
we're in. I think we're in. We're podcasting.
Here's the lowdown. We, this past week, got starters in for Warhammer Champions. This is a game we played at Gen Con for the first time. We're very fascinated by it, got starters in. And then Jonathan, Robert, Steven, and I, we talked about this last week, but we each got our starter for our faction.
Yep.
Each starter also comes with a booster pack. So we opened those up and gave each other all the faction cards from those booster packs to each other. So I got all the Chaos cards as an example. And we proceeded to, we'd already been and we're continuing to play a whole bunch. Steven, more than anybody, that's here.
I got on the beta of the app. So we can't see any details, I think, because of the NDA. But I will tell you it is phenomenal. And the game is incredible. For a game that I didn't know anything about, even as it released,
yeah,
I wasn't expecting it to, I expected it to be like a, excuse me for the kind of simple terms, but a Warhammer money grab, if you will. Like, okay, throw the Warhammer license on it, you know, like give them a little something to sell in the GW stores as a card game because we need an entry into the catalog. Hope that people play it for a little while and then move on to something else.
That is distinctly not the case.
This is one of the best card games in the past decade for me. And there's a lot of reasons. I've been thinking about why. Obviously, that's an important facet of the conversation. I'd be curious to know your answers to this. But one of the things that is so appealing to the game for me is, one, the positioning element of it. I'm a huge fan of positioning and anticipation of plays, and I think that's really important to the game. But the second is that it's self-restricted in a way that prevents snowballs to a serious degree for me. And we've talked about this before.
Except for on our live stream on Monday.
Well, yeah, so you can definitely lose hard and win hard.
You thought it was going to be a snowball, one game, and it wasn't.
And it wasn't.
It just looked like a snowball.
I mean, so like in most games, you can lose hard, you can win hard. But that's not what I mean by snowball. I mean that if decks are equally kind of put together, well put together, they're well oiled.
There's unlikely to be that case.
Your bad draws or your unlucky things that happen to you are constrained by the fact that your opponent has a very limited ability to take advantage of openings, because things might be going poorly for you, but that doesn't mean that they get to play 20 units onto the board and then do 30 damage. The game naturally gives you an amount of time that's necessary to find your way back into a game and to reward players who are making consistently solid plays over the course of the experience, rather than some weird combo that you strung together that did an incredible amount of damage.
Yeah, well, I think that's linked to my favorite part of the game, which is kind of the next phase of that, is the game transforms the typical management of resources into a management of time. Mm-hmm. And so you're constantly managing, basically you get 2 actions a turn. Every action you don't take, you draw a card. So this is why things, even like the game we've been streaming on Monday nights, and we were playing a couple games, and one of the games it was like you were ahead like 23 or 4 to like 5. But you had also spent all your cards. So you'd played all your removal cards, you'd played all your units, you were down to like a card. Meantime, because you had units that made it where I couldn't put units in 2 of my 4 spots, I had other things on the board that were doing some damage, but then I couldn't play anything. Mm-hmm. So I was just passing, draw 2, passing, draw 2, passing, draw 2. So by the time your kind of heat ran out, because like I think you peaked very quickly, I was able to take several turns in a row with knowledge of the cards in my hand, with you having to waste time just drawing cards and being basically subjected to whatever's on the top of your decks, what you're playing.
Yeah.
And so I was able to curve back. And it came right down to the end where I had winning hand, unless you're capable of blocking like a bunch of damage and you happen to have like, you drew the next 4 cards in your deck. were the kind of cards that could prevent that damage. So I think the lack of managing resources prevents the snowballing because there is no resources. The only resources is your cards and your choice to play them, put them on the board. And that, as a game mechanic, we've seen that a lot lately. Like Transformers didn't have resources, Keyforge doesn't have resources. You just play units and go. And I actually think that that is one level of simplification in these games that I'm super happy about. Like I picture older games that have the typical, you need cards that produce resources to play other cards that cost resources, and it all starts to kind of feel a little too complex for what real gain.
Yeah, well, the thing that I'm having fun, I would say, wrapping my mind around is the element of all cards are of equal value inherently, right? So any card you draw is as good as any card you play, is as good as any card your opponent plays, etc. So the value that you get out of cards is directly related to what is it doing for you in this particular instance? Is it higher value than it is normally because it's in a particularly good place or on a particularly good champion, or did it just advance your blessing? And my removal cards, if I'm just trading my card for your card, I need to be very, very careful about when I make that trade, because it's very easy to go into the game and say like, oh, that thing's going to hurt me next turn, I better remove that. Yeah. But it's like everything's going to hurt you. Every card is going to be good. Every card is going to be relevant. So it really comes down to making, if you can consistently make plays that are creating scenarios that make your cards more higher value than your opponent's cards, right? And that's not done through paying more for them or anything else. It's done through clever play. And that is so refreshingly good.
It's cool, right? I mean, I think that's what you think about something like Netrunner, which I think that game is incredible and I love it. Happened to be designed by the same person too. It's funny. But the reality of like, you know, a card that is pay 5, gain 9 money, typical is Sure Gamble or Hedge Fund, versus a card that costs, you know, 1 credit and a card, then you have to like click to get money off of, and like there's a different variable on like what this costs. And there was a time element involved in that too. But like at the same time, in this case, that's one thing I'm now starting to appreciate about the game is like, everything is worth a certain amount of damage, either prevented or done. And that's the only thing that matters. So like when you're looking and it's like, well, I could remove that guy and save myself 2 damage, or I could play a guy and either, if they don't answer it, do 5. Which one's the wiser investment?
Correct.
And it's like, well, the 5 is worth it. And even on the removal, it's kind of like I feel this way in Keyforge too. It's really cool. There's nothing quite like playing a new game because there's so much to learn about the fundamentals of how to play. And I think both Keyforge and Warhammer are so different that you have to think differently, because similar in Keyforge, I felt like I've reached a kind of new plateau where like, and it's the same thing with Warhammer Champions, I'm not just playing all the cards I can, and I'm actively constructing moments that I want to happen. And I've had this literally in the past week happen with both games, where it's just like with Warhammer Champions, I know what my deck can do, and like these combinations that like result in this big swing. And so instead of just randomly playing what I've got all the time, I'm building towards
tempting,
this thing, right? Yeah, it is tempting. It's like, oh, I can remove and stop this thing. But like if I wait to do that, here's what that means. And the same thing with Keyforge happened, where I played some game against Tim, and we played a best of 3 series with 2 decks. And it was really funny. The third game was so much different than the first 2 because we both started to understand the decks. And we were starting to like what used to seem like, obviously I should just go ahead and play this unit, now became, no, I'm actually trying to build to this thing.
You have an end game in mind.
Yeah, totally.
Almost. And that's, Champions does this really, really intelligently, because, you know, a game like Keyforge, your units are forever. And then you have a game like L5R where units are dependent on how long you invest in them from the tokens or the resources. But Champions is everything has at max 4 turns in play, period. It doesn't matter. The moment you play it, it's going to be around four or less turns. Yeah. And that creates that kind of, it feels like a dance or like a fencing match almost. It's like this back and forth, this tug of war that's going on constantly, and everything is always reaching its end as new things are starting. And so there's just a level to it that is so, it's almost like solving a puzzle. It's very pleasing, right? It's like
and I think that's a really good way of putting it, because like for me, it's going back to the time management thing. It's like it's the first game where, in any game, I think Netrunner, Destiny, X-Wing, whatever game I'm super into at the time, understanding what's possible and what's coming and what's going to happen is helpful and it can be to your advantage. But at the same time, in this game, you're solving a puzzle that is evolving throughout the course of a game. And you're constantly having to look 3 or 4 turns ahead.
Yeah.
It's demanding that of you, kind of a thing, to make good plays. And because it's not as immediate. The immediate effects of pausing to draw 2 cards or actually playing this card and taking up that slot. Because, it's the kind of thing where you need to get them on the board to get to their higher sides usually.
Sure.
But at the same time, it's sort of like in Netrunner how you never want to draw with your last click.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're going to spend one of your 4 clicks in a turn drawing a card, you may as well in Netrunner do that at the very first to know what your options are.
Of course, yeah.
But if you kind of string that across 4 turns in Warhammer, where it's if 2 turns from now I'm just going to draw 2 cards, should I go ahead and just draw 2 cards?
Yeah, or should I play something, draw, play something, draw?
Yeah,
so you're...
Because how important is, essentially, are there cards in my deck that I haven't seen that could fundamentally alter the next 3 or 4 turns?
Yeah.
Where it's if you have the card, the card that is, this is the optimal play, you may as well play it, right?
Right.
But at the same time, recognizing, that's what I've started seeing. It's if I'm going to draw next turn, I have to ask, what am I really gaining by playing the stuff now?
Correct.
Am I one step ahead on a little bit of damage? And if I drew something else, would I rather play it?
Are you at risk of losing if you don't get this thing out now? Right? Because you could do 6 damage with this thing in the next 2 turns, or you could do 6 damage with it next turn and get 2 cards. And so it's if you're at 28 health, are you in a rush?
Totally. That's exactly it.
Why are you in a rush?
I found myself trying to burst out as much damage as I could up front, and it's for what reason? Then in the middle, I'm just gonna have to draw cards, and it's I may as well start by drawing cards, or at least playing a card, drawing a card, playing a card, drawing a card, until I'm ready to set up my big whatever's gonna happen.
And you can look on the board and say if they don't do anything in 3 turns, they're gonna lose. You can see those numbers on the board, so that's what's something that's really cool. I found myself finding plays I would be casting a spell, and in Champions, if you're not familiar with the system, all of our lovely listeners, you play a thing, and then it does anything that's printed on it according to its top left corner, and then it spins the next turn and does it again, spins the next turn, does it again. Spells generally they do nothing for 2 or 3 turns, and they do something big right at the very end.
It's getting ready for that Spirit Bomb in Dragon Ball Z.
Right, it really does feel like that too, which is amazing. But what I was looking at is...
Just don't miss.
I've also got a unit that does an extra 2 damage if it's... Basically, there's no opposing unit across from it, Long Strike Raptor. And so I would wait until my spell was about to fire. So I was 1 turn away. And then I knew that my opponent had 2 actions, and I would play 2 of those Raptors into disengaged slots. So now, if they spend a removal card on the spell, they can't also deal with these Raptors over here. So I knew I was getting 1 card would be super high value for me in that instance.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of my experience with the game, I was not making those kinds of plays. But now, and I literally mean this, I'm easily over 100 games on the app, 100 for sure.
That's ridiculous.
It changes your entire perspective, and so I have seen so much of the depth revealed in this, and that's why I'm completely in love with it.
Now, I will say, if you're listening and we've been babbling on, you have no idea what we're saying. We have filmed and it's being worked on now, a learning series for Warhammer Champions.
Yeah.
We technically already have one up for Keyforge and Transformers, but we're going back and adding the more produced videos to those. So if you are interested, that will be coming very soon.
Yes.
And if you're really interested, we actually added the starters this past week to our store.
Yeah.
So you can grab those. And did we talk about subscriptions last week?
We added the starters. We added the subscriptions as well. It's just it's so good because their minimum advertised price, which gets them down to $76 for us, $76 something, and then we're shipping them for free in the continental U.S., which I think is significant, particularly because a lot of the product I think moved in Europe and UK through the Games Workshop.
It was gone very quickly when it came out of Gen Con.
So it's free shipping in the US, minimum advertised price. There's no better price or really deal on this. You don't get charged until a couple of weeks before in our case, the reprint happens. So we're going to send the Set 1 reprint is the first thing shipped through that subscription. Then the set 2 will be, I think, probably about a month or so afterwards, presumably.
I think it's by the end of the year for sure, so it'll be not that far behind.
And then you can stay on that as long as you want. You can cancel it whenever it's free and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like a really good automatic pre-order, and I'm so happy with where our subscription system is right now. It's almost like the past, definitely. Well, it started in 2012, and it was.
I think technically our first subscription shipped in like November 2011.
Wow.
But
it's amazing. So we've been investing in it since then, and we've been really trying to build it up into something very robust, a lot of custom development. And it is at a place where I'm just like, I want to talk about it because I'm excited about it. I think it's a really great offering.
Sure.
So excuse our extended pitch on the cast, but it really is awesome. So if you play any of the games that we support, you should absolutely check out a subscription, and we continue to add features and new things to it.
I think if you are, because again, I said this last week, but I am not a Warhammer person.
Right.
I've never been super into the universe, none of that. But the game is incredibly fun, and one of my favorite parts of the game is that the starters for this game, the campaign decks, there's one for each faction. There's 4 factions.
Perfect.
And they're fully playable, completely legal decks, and they're good and they're fun, and they're all you need to try the game. I was teaching Lee last night in the store. He bought a set of 4. We were playing some games. And it is just it's almost like a palate cleanser for everything else I've been playing for decades and decades, where it's doing things differently and in a way I just have never experienced. So when you get if you're a very experienced card gamer, eventually you start understanding why someone new to a game could be very good at it quickly if they have enough card game experience. But this is different. Like it is. You're not just going to walk in and be like, I'm great at this because I play cards. You'll obviously have some advantages, but it is just a truly unique experience.
And yet it still hits all of those old school pleasure zones.
Yeah, and it's cool too because we have 4 people, and it was really funny. We got the starters in the day they came in. This was Friday.
Yeah.
So we're splitting our 4, and then 4 more people in the office actually, were like vultures coming down. I think some pictures got posted of that. All of us.
They're definitely taken. I don't know if they're posted yet.
But they also split, and then since then, I think a lot of us, including me, have gotten a second starter to basically get 3 ofs or consistency with stuff and change some stuff around.
Bryce grabbed a starter just to get that booster pack in there.
That's crazy town. He's just hungry. Got the old.
Dude, just give it to me.
But
the other thing worth mentioning, we'll finish that thought.
Main point is, I think this game's worth a try. I'm very excited about the future of a company like PlayFusion. They seem like they are kind of coming into the industry with an outside perspective. And I'm really just curious to see where they're going and what they're going to do. The app is, I won't say anything else about it because I'm not supposed to.
Yeah.
But the short version is, even if you don't like Warhammer, I think that you can treat the starters like a board game just to give it a try. Get your toe in the water. I think you'll really enjoy it. And then like us, we're kind of playing it a little more minimally than we have games in the past. A little more like when we were kids and we didn't own everything, which I'm super pumped about. 4 of us are basically split in a box.
Can we crack that topic open?
Which topic?
Of games being fun, and if it's just us getting old and finding value.
So,
but before you do, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I'm about to go on a big one here.
Well, I do want to say that whenever I first heard about the app integration and the fact that you could scan the face of all of your cards and have them in the app.
Those specific cards.
It sounded cool, right? It sounded like an interesting thing. What I didn't fully appreciate was how powerful it is to open something physically, be able to have a deck with that physically, be able to have all those same cards online, and be able to test games, like churn games out, to kind of figure out about where you want your deck to be, and then you can make those changes physically and start playing again.
Yeah.
Like the amount of time it takes to kind of test out theories and ideas physically.
Build the deck, sleeve it,
so
unsleeve
much
the old
longer.
cards, organize your stuff, find the right stuff.
Because I ultimately want to play physically more than digitally, ideally, but you can get that testing experience. And then if you want to, like there's digital boosters too that you'll get new cards. And so like you can do deck testing and then buy singles.
Sure.
Right?
Just to get exactly what you want, which is
or
a
it's
cool
like,
approach.
I've played with this thing online, this aspect of the sea, and just caught my heart immediately. For anybody listening, of course, you know that would be the case for me. And I had played this card many times online, never once physically. Ryan pulls one, and I'm like, I know immediately that I want this.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and purchase that.
Like I bought it, yeah.
Yeah. So onto the bigger topic you were kind of hinting at.
Yeah,
I'm currently working on a blog that is talking about this a little bit in my Chaos deck, But the short version is, and I have to think it's somewhat inspired by our situation and also Keyforge. So Keyforge, unique deck game. You don't change your deck. You don't need to collect it all. You can literally get in with a $10 deck and start playing, and that's the one version of that deck in the whole universe, which is cool. But that really harkened back to the 90s when we first started playing these games.
We was chillin'.
Yeah, I was a kid. The first set
babies.
of Pokemon came out, and I was 10. I think I was 9 technically when this first came out, and I was gifted a starter set and like 6 booster packs, and that's what I had, right? So like when I went to school and there were other people playing Pokemon, I didn't have all the other stuff. And the internet, this is still early days of the internet. I'm dating myself here. But I also literally couldn't afford a $200 Charizard at the time, even though Charizard is the thing I wanted the most in the entire universe as a 9-year-old, right? And so that did a couple of things, right? One is that the actual playing experience was different because I was playing against you and you were playing against me, and we both didn't have exactly what we wanted.
Right.
And then I'll tell you what, when I finally got that Charizard, I squealed so loud, it's unbelievable, right? And I think this is, a lot of people have some difficulty with collectible games because, whether it's gambling or it's random and it's super expensive and stuff. But when I was a kid, like, it wasn't so much like, you were owning it all, and so you just had to like gamble or buy enough of it.
That wasn't even a concept to us.
It
was like, we'll just use whatever we have.
And then trade
try to get
aggressively,
more.
And it was like this pursuit. And it reminded me a lot, and it works so well with Pokemon, because the game itself is like you go randomly find Pokemon and try to capture them.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of emulating the same thing in the card game. But like you show up to a tournament and someone has that Charizard, and you're just like sweating with like envy, right? You're just like, I want that card. And then you finally get it. And so like I got Archon, I think is his name.
Archon, yeah, whatever that is.
He's a Wizard Warrior champion. It's like Kira pulled him, and I was just like, I need that. Like I need to have that, and it's not out of a sense of like I'm gonna go get all of it, which is different. But again, I think what's happening is that recognition. And this is what I meant by my situation. It's like I'm super into Destiny, and then I have a second game which is X-Wing, and X-Wing is non-collectible and it doesn't come out enough and I only play one faction, so I can kind of contain that. But then it's like Keyforge is like, well, I can do that too. It's like, I can buy some decks. And
at least $10. I mean, that's all.
And it's fine. There's not a meta to keep up with.
You might buy a few more.
I will.
Now and again.
I'll buy a 12 or 24 or 36. But I can keep up with Keyforge. And then you insert Warhammer Champions, right? It's like, before I even play
oh, no.
It's like, this is Warhammer.
Yeah.
This is collectible, which means it's going to be, there's a lot of cards. It's going to be expensive.
Pretty big sets.
And, for like Destiny, it being collectible, I love it because that means a lot of cards consistently come out. Mm-hmm. Well, semi-consistently come out. And so there could be 12 sets a year for Destiny, and I would be happy as a clam because I would get so much value out of the number of cards coming out.
And you're a huge Star Wars fan.
Yeah,
straight
like
up.
Star Wars and card games mixing in a great game like that, and it's over. But with Warhammer, it's like, I'm not that into Warhammer. I already have at least 2 or 3 or 4, and I don't even play Arkham, and I want to.
Yeah.
And that's just not even on the radar anymore. Maybe one of the best games ever. And I'm just sitting out.
You got friends with cards. Never forget.
But going into Warhammer Champions, it's like there is zero reason I would ever start playing this game. And like I think the truth of it is, you can buy a starter and then we can split a booster box, and it's like we are going to have a lot of fun. I'm not going to go win worlds.
Essentially $30-ish.
So MSRP on the starter's $15. The booster box subscription is $15, $20, so like $30, $40, right? And then every set after that, if we keep buying boxes, will be $15, $20, and it's like, I can spend $50 or $60 a year. It's also nice that we'll see how long this lasts. 4/8/9 people here at work that are planning to play it in a non-necessarily own it all kind of way. Yeah. And so we know we'll have opponents. And one thing I'm super interested in exploring, and I posted this in our like local Facebook group for our store, is this idea of like building leagues and such that play like that.
Yeah.
Where like you start with a starter.
Like kind of escalation.
Yeah, you escalate out and then you start back over. Because I just feel like so many people either assume that to play a collectible game you have to have it all, and that's how you have to play it. You have to buy a whole bunch of boxes and get all this product. Or are never going to get into these games if that is how you have to play. Where it's like a $15 starter and then like $5 or $10 in booster packs a week. Most people can play like that.
Yeah.
And if we all played like that, the real question for me is like, is that more fun than just buying 20 boxes when it comes out?
I think 100% more fun. And I honestly think it makes you a way better player. Because having to play around with cards that are non-optimal, first of all, makes you create much more interesting decks when you do have all the cards that you want, because you actually get experience with cards that you normally would never touch. And then second, you had to be clever.
Yeah.
And the need to be clever in a card game is the first reason that I loved trilogies in Destiny, because you have to be a little non-optimal in your builds.
You have to make it work.
Second, why I was amped for Keyforge, which is just like, oh, you got to be real clever, because maybe we all just get new decks and then we see who's clever the soonest.
Yeah.
And then third, it's like, well, Warhammer Champions, uh-oh. And now it's like, but we can find a way to make this the same kind of experience. And then it's like, well, why are we doing this all of a sudden with everything that's happening? Even Transformers, it's like, grab a box,
We're gonna draft it.
and draft it, right?
And then we're done until the next set.
You know, it's funny because I never really, there was not a lot of introspection whenever Destiny came out about that preconceived notion of you need to buy enough to get everything. And we're doing saga sets, of course, to allow that option to happen. There are a lot of people talking 3, 4, 5 booster boxes is the necessary buy-in for the game, these kinds of things. And that was never really questioned as much, I think, as it should have been. And I wonder if it comes from, obviously Magic had a lot of success getting that pro tour player mentality going on, right? People to this day say, oh, I was pro tour Magic, right? Like it's a badge of honor.
Sure.
And if you're aspiring to be anything in the competitive Magic community and you don't have all the cards, like you're done.
Yeah.
Like you can't build the perfect deck, then you're not even going to come close.
Yeah.
So that kind of became the understanding, I think, in the collectible card market was like, if you don't have all the options, you can't build the best deck. And if you can't build the best deck, you can't do well at this game.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times that meant that the singles market was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Where like, once you figure out what the best deck is, you just buy all the cards that you need. You don't necessarily own them all, but you buy them all to win, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of gets away. But at the same time, a huge part of Magic's success was Friday Night Magic.
Still, always, forever. We said that, I swear.
We said that so many
Friday
times.
Night Magic has been said on this podcast probably 20,000 times for two people who have never been involved in it.
Ever. But the truth is that like a lot of people go draft Magic on Friday. They sell the stuff they don't want. They probably make half the money or break even.
Mm-hmm.
And they just hang out and play and keep doing that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where like with a lot of these games, I think part of it is maybe our age, etc. But the truth of the matter is I think there is a way to play these games. If you ask yourself why you're playing them, I imagine that most people's answer is either to have fun. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll ask this at the end of the cast. To have fun or to hang out with a particular group of people, right? So you're either socializing or having fun, and then you ask the question, it's like, well, why am I buying all the Destiny cards? And it is fun. Granted, I love buying the Destiny cards. I love having them all. I love being able to build whatever I want to build.
Absolutely.
And I play. But at the same time, it's like if everyone agreed, that's why trilogies is great, it's like, or draft, everyone agrees to a certain way of playing, we can play this game in a way that doesn't require hundreds of dollars from everybody every quarter. And I think that just opens the door up to who could possibly do this, which I'm a huge fan of, right? And I think the real question for me is like, and I don't know how to measure it, but which one is more fun? Where it's like, would I have more fun with Destiny if I bought no cards and when a set came out and I just drafted until I had enough and we just built, like imagine if there was a weekly draft for Destiny and then in this 12-week league, you also had constructed games going on, but you could only construct out of whatever you drafted.
Yeah, sure, that's a thing. Here's a couple of questions on that front that I have for you and maybe for the audience to ponder as well. The first is that this is more fun than if I had had all these cards immediately. It 100% is. There's a lot of, like lizard brain, psychology going on with that, of course. This element of discovery and not knowing what you're going to get and that kind of being surprised by what comes to the table. But like a great example, this aspect of the Sea Guy, I had been playing Champions since Gen Con, essentially, having no idea that this thing existed.
Isn't that great?
And the first time that I saw it,
probably on the app.
I was like, what else is here that I'm missing? And that moment alone, then that's a totally new paradigm for me. It's like I now am on a hunt to get this card. And that was super
here
fun.
we are, right?
And I finally got it.
this
And now I
morning
get to
you got
play
a huge
with
shot
it.
of dopamine when you got it.
And now I get to actually build a deck
Well,
and play with this
I
thing.
think that's what, for me, like, I did not know, because I didn't play Death, which has them. I did not know that there were Warrior Wizard Champions.
Yeah.
And then I was on the app, and I was playing against a person who was also playing Chaos, and I saw his cards, and I clicked on it. I was like, who's this guy?
Yeah, never seen him, right?
Yeah.
Now you have to adapt
And that's what,
your deck to that situation.
100%.
Right?
And also now I realize there's a guy I really want to get.
Yeah.
Like, there's a Chaos Champion that I need, because I kept being like, man, there's a few spells I want to have in my deck, but it's not worth a wizard slot.
Yeah.
It's like, here's my answer.
It's amazing, right?
But that's where, like, I've said this forever, and I think it comes potentially from being a kid in the 90s playing these games, which was, I'm not a huge fan of spoilers. I would much rather a set of Destiny come out right now and me know next to nothing.
Yeah.
And I crack my box open, and every card I'm seeing is just like
Brand
new.
new. Yeah.
Like in drafting in that environment, I remember pre-releases where it's just like, never seen them.
Yeah, good
You're
luck.
opening cards and building the deck with no knowledge.
Yeah.
But that's where, like, in this game, they're online, but, like, I haven't looked at all the cards. And so, because it's just cool and it's fun. And it's just going back to this. Not only is this version of the game, the way of playing this so much different than what we've been doing. And part of it, too, I think, is not just people being used to buying everything, but, like, LCGs, we were into that for a long time. And it is feasible to own all that. And even Destiny, it's like, it's small enough that it is feasible to own it all. Like, technically. Deceptively
I think
small.
My question, too, for Destiny, since it's Star Wars, and that's such a... People have so much emotional input and attachment with Star Wars. Like, of any game that is around, you want to play exactly what you want to play in Star Wars.
Like,
right?
if you want to play Boba Fett, you're going to get Boba Fett.
Now,
thing.
aside from the old aspect of the sea, who's great, I don't care about I don't even know Celestant Prime. There's probably somebody who played with this miniature 20 years ago, and it means a lot to them. But I don't care about any of this stuff. War, Star Strike, it's all just words to me.
Yeah, same with all the cards, really. Like I said, I'm not a Warhammer person.
But with Star Wars, it's like, maybe I must be playing Yoda. Like, it's my favorite Star Wars character. So it makes a little more sense to be very adamant about getting the collection so you can express, the Star Wars that you want to express.
So maybe there's a sense of, like, not caring about the universe and really not caring about the game in the way that is like, I need to find the optimal best deck ever. Once you remove that, I think the potential to enjoy that game is, like, the seriousness and the pressure of it's off. Like, with Destiny,
it really is.
When I'm playing Constructed, I have this, like, pressure to, like, not just play. My goal is play the characters I want to play and also build the very best version of the deck with those characters.
Yeah.
Versus, like, how do I build the deck that most feels like this, or that I enjoy the most, right?
Yeah.
And that's why in this game, it's like, man, what I enjoy doing, right, is like everything Chaos is doing.
Right.
It's like I'm murdering my own dudes to gain a benefit to hurt you.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I can kill you pretty quickly if things go my way. And it's like, I like being clever like that.
Yeah.
And like,
would you say it's fair to that you essentially, if we had all of the Champions cards in front of us, the deck building element of the game takes center stage, and the playing element of the game less so. I think it's fair to say. When we don't have all the cards available and we're discovering cards as we go, you have a little bit of deck building every now and again, but you're also, the playing is so much more important. The choices you're making are more important because you never know what you're going to see on the other side of the table. So you have to not only adapt to that in real time when you're actually playing, but you have to build a deck that might have to be ready for something you don't know exists.
Sure.
So it's like I was building this deck earlier, and it's like, I don't know the card pool for Chaos, Death, Destruction, but I know that it might be handy to be able to lock down like 2 unit slots.
that seems good. Yeah.
Or it might be handy to hurt a wizard especially. And my opponent's deck might have no wizards in it, but the moment that they pull one and put it into their deck, it's like, oh, I've got a little juice for that.
Sure.
And so it's a different paradigm, and I could do this forever.
I think so. I think that's where, like, you just have a box come in 3-ish, 4 times a year, and then, like, things freshen up, and you go. But that's where, like, for me, when you're building a deck, like even in Destiny, these like smaller decks, right? Destiny has 30 cards in the deck. This has 30 cards or 40, 30.
It's 30 action.
Yeah, 30 action cards, and so like that is a small card pool to build from, and so your deck should be relatively consistent. Like if you have 3 of each card in your deck. That's only 10 different cards.
You're gonna see what you want to see. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you draw 7, it's like you're probably seeing 5 or 6 of your 10 cards that are in your deck, right? And so like that is where when you build and you're just doing full unconstructed, it's more machine-like. And that's even trilogies versus standard in Destiny, where it's like if you build the machine good enough, it just kind of does its thing every time.
Yeah.
And you can play enough where you don't have to think anymore.
Yeah.
But it's like, isn't that kind of the point? Like,
Right.
aren't we playing the game to play the game and figure out new
Right.
stuff every time versus like engineer it?
And isn't that ultimately the inspiration for Keyforge's very existence, right? It's like, it's weird that at the time that, the industry has shifted, or at least Fantasy Flight has shifted to say, we recognize this, that we didn't know we'd been feeling ultimately, and here's our answer, the unique deck game. Right at that very moment, we get hit with 2 collectible games, Transformers and Champions all at once, and Destiny's still going well. And it's like, now we have to totally change our paradigm kind of all at once. Maybe Keyforge led the way a little bit in saying like, maybe we shouldn't, and listen to Garfield talk about it, and it's like, maybe we should be reevaluating the way we're approaching these games, because he's basically saying, this is not what I intended it to be like. I didn't intend everybody to own everything. It should be about discovery. And so at the same time, we're pivoting to these new collectible games and saying, you know what, we'll take you up on that. Like, let's make that happen.
Well, and I think that's important for 2 reasons. One is, if you had asked me before Destiny came out, it's like, would you rather play Destiny? And again, I love Star Wars. I love card games. So like, the more the merrier for me in terms of how many cards are coming out, how much it costs.
Yeah,
there would have to be so many sets coming out before I was losing value on my time with like how much I would enjoy that.
Sure.
But if you'd asked me, would you rather play this game where you can have everything, or would you rather feel exactly like you did when you were 10, not know any cards that are coming out before they come out? When they come out, you literally are capped. You can only buy 18 packs. You have to trade, you have to like work at it, and then like you get 1 pack a week.
Yeah.
Until the next set comes out after that. It's like, which of these would you enjoy more? And it's like, legitimately, it's that version. Mm-hmm. And that's crazy. Like, as someone who's
and yet we weren't doing it.
Well, and like as someone who's been so into competitive card games, I think when you're a kid, you're like, man, when I can just own it all, I could be world champion.
Yeah,
right?
it's like when you play
thing.
video games all day, and then you get home like these days, and it's like, I'm not playing any video games.
I'm not playing video. I'm not doing anything like that. But that's where like
I'm playing that app though.
If you can simulate, I think that's what Keyforge does brilliantly. I think that's what this game, and that's the trick. Any collectible game could be played like this.
Yes. Isn't that just adulthood? Maybe it is us getting older, because some say that maturity is just an appreciation and utilization of self-restraint. Like actually recognizing what's worthwhile, what's valuable, not just pursuing things blindly, but saying, if I do it this way, it will be better, even though it might be non-optimal in a lot of ways.
I think that's 100% it, where it's like you're asking the question, why am I doing this, and what do I really want out of it? And ultimately, I want to have fun. I want to hang out with my friends. And, if I'm maximizing those things, it doesn't look like buy all the cards, build the best deck, win the world championship. Mm-hmm. And I actually think the second point, I said 2 points earlier, I only said 1.
I'm on like 6 points that I haven't gotten to,
But the second part of that is, I just lost it.
See? That's why you can't do 2
points.
points.
You said 6 and then it's gone. But the second part is, I got it, I'm back. And the final thing I'll say, which is why I'm excited about Keyforge and why I'm excited about even locally approaching and online these games like this for us. Because I think that the vast majority of the world does not participate in tabletop gaming. And there's a lot of reasons that's the case, and one of them is because of how hard it is to do so. Like for an outsider to get into Destiny right now, and there's been a lot of people posting on Reddit, it's awesome, on Reddit, on Facebook groups about, hey, I'm just not getting into Destiny. Well, thanks to the group, what should I do? And here's like tips and recommendation, but like the barriers are high.
Yeah, crazy high.
And so playing games...
For games,
which is crazy. But playing games like this, it can become the norm. That like we were talking earlier with the league and the store, where like you start with a starter.
I think we do so much in store.
You get 1 booster pack a week. Good luck. Yeah. And it's like, I think that is, and Keyforge as an example, it's just even better. But that could get so many more people playing these games, which is awesome. It's great for everybody. I think a lot of people would get a lot out of having a community, that like the communities around tabletop. And I'm very excited. I think the next 5 to 10 years is going to be I think there's a huge pivot coming for tabletop, and I'm excited to see it.
Here's Steven's final point.
I made mine. Then we got to get into questions.
This could be really fascinating.
I'm going to try my best not to respond.
For everyone to consider.
You know what I mean?
We started out and we had the collectible space. Let's call it Magic, and let's call it Yu-Gi-Oh, and let's call it Pokemon. And as those competitive events and that kind of mindset started to happen, you got more of this, I need everything so that I can go compete, because that was kind of what I was doing with the game. That was the point. Well, the biggest response to that is, all this collectible stuff, let's get a living card game format where you can own all the things at very little cost. So now it's like the assumption is still that you need to own everything, but you just don't have to pay as much because it's not random. And now we went from LCGs to Keyforge, which is like, well, LCGs are about owning everything. Collectible games became about owning everything. We're going to make a game where you can't own everything.
You just
literally impossible.
Can't.
And then, kind of in response and in that same space is, well, let's get back into collectible games, but let's get rid of this notion that you have to collect it all.
Yeah.
And so it's like this weird de-evolution and then evolution back. It's like all returning back to the original days of Magic the Gathering.
And, you know, I mean, I think there's a reason that Magic was...
You responded.
Fire.
There is a reason.
There is a reason,
There's
right?
a huge reason.
And that's where, to me, it's just asking the fundamental question, like, why are we doing this? And the thing is, a lot of people, after the big 90s, 2000s blitz of CCGs, kind of like were like, and they got burned on Magic and Pokemon or whatever, and they're like, the collectibles are, I'm out. Like, if it's collectible, see you later.
Yeah.
And Destiny faced a lot of that, because that was one of the first new major games that came out in a long time. But the reality is that the collectability nature of it and the way it's packaged, to me, is capable of introducing such an element of discovery. Mm-hmm. And it can, like in LCGs, I think part of their fundamental issue is there is no discovery.
Right.
Everyone knows all the cards. Everyone has access to all the cards. So the best deck is everyone's playing it. Mm-hmm. Like, and even in Destiny, when everyone can just own it all, it's like the best decks you just see over and over again, right? It's like right now, Mill's popular, and it's a certain deck, and it's really good. I played it. It's like autopilot. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, half the people show up with that. And it's like, this is, even just as one of the best things about these games compared to a board game is that I can show up and know my opponents are going to have different things.
Yeah.
Like, I get to play 5 opponents, and I get to see a whole bunch of different cards. Keyforge guarantees that.
Yes.
I think you can play Warhammer in a way where you have it all. But then the real question is just like, is that really what you want?
Yeah.
Like, is that really what we want? And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just kind of a fundamental like reassessment of what's going on here.
And for some people, yes, the answer is yes, that is what I want. And that's more of the deck building crew, building the machine crew. And then you have the playing crew, and for too long, they've had to be smashed into the same box. Yeah. I think you're starting to see that differentiation. So hopefully, everybody out there will also explore some of these concepts of how do you actually just tailor your collection habits to give you the most fun and create the most fun for your group.
Good question. Great question. Speaking of questions,
let's get to them.
Let's get to them. That's correct. You can use the hashtag, if you're unfamiliar, on the show. You can use the hashtag AskCovenant on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We answer your questions right here on the Covenant Cast each week, and we love doing it. Really appreciate everyone asking the questions. So don't forget to use the hashtag AskCovenant, even if you're responding on like YouTube or responding on a Facebook post that we make. Add that hashtag. That makes sure we see it and we tag it, and then we answer it. So, question 1 from, it looks like Flip. I thought it was Philip until I really looked at it. Philip.
Yeah.
It looks like there's an I missing, but I digress. What do you think will be the most popular format for Keyforge? I've heard rumblings of league play being the thing to do, where let's say you have 12 people in a league, you open 12 decks first week, play. Next week you bid chains, or the handicap, to get first pick of the decks, perhaps open a couple new decks as dark horses. This seems a lot more interesting to me than just open deck, play tournament, throw the deck away, move on.
Open deck, play tournament, throw deck away. Yeah, no, that's a good question. Most popular format for Keyforge. This really, man, it's amazing that this, kind of unintentionally, fits right into the conversation we're already having. Like, the most popular format for Keyforge should probably vary by your group. I mean, if you want to find the deck and you're on a quest to find that deck that just is perfect for you, you want to play in a format where you can use that deck over and over and over again. That's very important to you. If you just want to be assured of a new experience every time you go to an event, then buying a new deck and playing it that day is probably for you. And then there's all sorts of things in between where, like, you can ban other people's decks, or like you said, like bid on things and do the chain thing. To me, I think the best format for Keyforge is going to be the simplest format. I don't think you're going to be able, I think for stores in particular that are going to be incentivized to move product, welcome to commerce, they're probably going to want to push the buy a new deck, play format. Now, I don't think that means you throw that deck away, though.
Sure.
Like, open it, play with it throughout the day, and then keep it, and then maybe once a month or once every couple of months, you have all of these decks that you can choose from to go to a big event, maybe bring 5 of them or whatever. But for like the day-to-day, I think buying a new deck and then playing it for a while and then holding on to it is the way that I want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that makes Keyforge so interesting is just how versatile it is in this way, which is I could easily see having a weekly league night where everyone shows up, $10, you get a new deck, everyone's got fresh new decks. I could also see it be, occasionally or frequently play the decks you want, with handicaps if you win too often kind of a thing. And then, finally for me, one of the craziest thing of these unique games, and this even goes for the board game category that they announced that board game, which is I think the idea of trading and swapping can be humongous, which is you buy decks, you play them for a while, you want a fresh set of experiences. Even if you're just talking to someone online, it's like, hey, I'm going to ship you 6 decks, you ship me 6 decks. You just get a whole new batch of decks to play, right?
Very cool.
And so I think we're going to see regions and stores and events that do crazy things, and I'm just excited to see all the different ways that people come up with to play the game.
Yeah, and you can do it. Hosea Burkardsmeyer, a long time. I've seen this name around quite a bit.
Is that not Josiah?
Josiah, it depends. I don't know. Sometimes it's that soft J. Let us know. As a Star Wars Armada player, I know the feeling of the game you love the most always seeming to be on the back burner. That is definitely true for the Armada community, unfortunately. Sort of like you mentioned with Magic and the games you all like playing, it feels like Armada is one of the least supported products in FFG's expandable game lineup, despite having sales numbers in the top 4 miniatures games when there were more than one wave of expansions being released a year. I remember us being surprised at Gamma that Armada was actually one of the top dogs. Yeah. Why do you think that is, and what would you recommend to players in not just the Armada community, but also other games in similar situations? Let's get to that first, and then there's a little addendum.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality of this, and I don't know, I have no information on this, but I get the sense, as a Star Wars fan, that there's honestly just a limited number of ships they have to put into that game. There's only so many Star Wars ships that fit that size and model type. Mm-hmm. And they're already reaching. They put out the Chimera, which is Thrawn's ship, but it's really just a kind of repaint of a ship that's already come out. And then they just announced, which we'll talk about in a second, I think I see SSD.
Yeah, the Superstar story,
yeah. But like, I have a feeling it's way more of a challenge in terms of like what to bring into this game. And because they're specifically, they have Imperial and Rebel right now, and they haven't branched into the Clone Wars era or into the post original trilogy era or the expanded universe, that like if you're just focused on the original conflict, there's just not that many ships to do. Mm-hmm. They did all the coolest ones, and they did a lot of the other ones, and then it's like, what now? What do we put out? So
I wonder too, from the business side of that, if I think about a sale, a comparable like dollar amount, let's say $100 in Star Wars Armada, and what that means for FFG versus $100 in Warhammer 40K, and what that means for Games Workshop. I think the combination of having to work through Lucas and getting all of that approved, and the time that it takes to do that, having to do all of that sculpting, and they're going super high detail, super accurate, etc., going through all of the drafts with manufacturing and factories and all of that, getting it all shipped and printed and made and all of that, and what the churn rate is on rejects, all of that kind of stuff. I'm going to guess the margin on Armada is probably much smaller than it would be on like a GW miniature.
Well, and GW also has like notoriously high price for low amount of model.
But at the same time, like maybe that's the reason they've been able to do it.
No, we could have a whole podcast about this. They may be the only people in the industry charging the right prices.
Yeah, so the sales might be high, but what that actually means to FFG's bottom line might be insignificant. So if you're looking at, do we bring Clone Wars into this, and the amount of time and design time and all that it takes, it might be a harder sell than we can tell just by looking at sales numbers.
Yeah, and I also think, just kind of reading the tea leaves here a little bit, which is like, just the fact of, I know a lot of the people that work worked on Armada were also X-Wing developers, and they just rebooted that game, or they're just now
That's
rebooting
true,
it.
yeah.
And so like they're literally releasing 5 years of content on release for this game.
They might have pulled people in.
So I have a feeling that it's like that was kind of a primary project as well. And also I remember Corey at the FFGN flight when he brought out the Super Star Destroyer was basically saying they had been working to get this out for years. So like,
Can you imagine?
Because that ship is like this big.
Oh, it's crazy.
And it's super accurate. Like it looks great, but like that's obviously a manufacturing challenge. Like no one's doing that.
Right.
Like not even in like toy stores. Like
Right.
there's not a company out there that is like producing that thing. So it could also be that like that's a challenging game to make stuff for. There are bigger ships that are more intricate than even like X-Wing, right? And so who really knows?
It could be all technical things. It could be the fact that it could be the popularity of the game, which it's hard to judge. I mean, the industry doesn't. There's no real data center for that, so it could be a number of things. But yeah, it's a bummer. Whenever the thing that you love is on the back burner, and Armada players have been in that unfortunate position for too long, and it really is just unfortunate. There's really no other thing to say.
That's it.
But not a mention of the Superstar Destroyer on the cast being the largest miniature product today by FFG. Even if you don't play Armada, it's a product people might even buy for collector's sake. I think that's a good point. That's a marvel of construction and
somewhere in between going to and probably going to buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
And it's worth noting for Star Wars fans listening, you should definitely check that out. Superstar Destroyer is amazing.
It is insane. So question number 3 is from Jason Wood. He says, love the cast, guys. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. Will do. Several times you've commented on how the LCG format is better for cooperative rather than competitive games. However, your Saga sets functionally make Destiny an LCG. Is your problem with LCGs for competitive formats the timing of releases? That is, the steady trickle of product does not shake up the meta like a huge release would, like a CCG or even Saga sets. If this is your line of thinking, do you feel like L5R's distribution model has solved this problem for LCGs, or has the price point of 6 packs in 6 weeks only limited the number of players? P.S. How can we get some Covenant playmats?
Oh, nice. That's a good question. We'll let you know when we know.
Yep.
So, very good questions. This is like the heaviest question segment ever. LCGs, LCGs have a lot of things that aren't just the product being available without collectability. So whenever you don't have a random element to your product, you can't do the things that we've been talking about in this cast. You cannot do escalation leagues, really, because every player who already owns that product isn't interested in buying it again just to escalate the format.
Sure.
And even then, it's like if you do an escalation league for people who already have all the products, your store's not selling anything. So for a lot of stores, that's out the door already. Secondarily, you can't do draft formats. You can't really do sealed formats. So you're stuck with essentially one mode of play, which is either forget all the banned and errata lists and throw it all together, or play with the competitive format as defined by the errata documentation. And the thing about that is it's just eliminating a lot of potential fun that you can have with a game when you have all of the things packaged up and non-random, non-collectible. So that's one thing I think that's relevant that makes Destiny different. I can get a Saga set and still draft Destiny and have a great time.
Yeah. Still
play a Trilogies format and have a great time. Still play Sealed. So there's a difference, and they haven't quite nailed it on the LCG. And I think we've talked about this many times. It could come down to just, if you have all the product available, you better be going crazy on formats. I mean, it better be cycle 1, it better be like these 3 packs and this thing, it better be themed events and all this. You should spend all of your time on themed and interesting events because the product has already solved itself.
Well, and I think there is an element of like the structure, the formats available, the number of cards coming out, the general excitement, etc. But I actually think there's a more macro, like economic problem, which is a lot of people that play LCGs competitively want the same level of competitive support that other games are getting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And the issue is that when essentially an LCG player is able to keep up for $15 a month, that when it comes to retail stores in particular only carries so much value. Mm-hmm. And so the struggle is that an LCG is never going to be capable, just a very specific example, of the support that a game like Destiny will get because of the economic engine. Same with Magic, right? There's a reason that stores can go be Magic stores.
Right.
Like they can literally, the one thing they do, 7 days a week, 7 nights a week, different formats, different tournaments, different leagues, different things, is because the economic model behind Magic is so powerful that it shaped our entire industry. Like it's a big 25-year, our industry is completely different because of that game, and not because of the game itself, it's because of the economic model, in my opinion. And so the struggle with LCGs on a competitive front is if you just want a competitive game that continually slightly changes, I think that's fine. But if you want a game that is constantly pushing new formats and new sports, because like even if that was happening, it's like that doesn't change the economics of the game.
Right. The economics are unchanged. It's for sure.
At the end of the day, it's kind of the same fundamental.
But it's essentially, if you have access to all the cards and you start playing in that format, and you can deck build anything you want, you can do whatever you want. That only lasts for so long. And the living element of the game, we've talked about this before, goes away after about year to year and a half. If there's just general like pack after pack, has a very small impact. You're not seeing diversity and changes in decks quick enough. So all of the stuff's available. You can build your deck however you want. It kind of starts to lose a lot of interest because you start seeing the same things over and over again. And I wonder, and this is a really good thing to posit, if it's even possible to play capital C casually in LCG, right? So like what we're talking about with Warhammer Champions, we can play this game casually because by the end of 3 to 4 months, we still would not own everything. Not even close. Not close. And so we're discovering new experiences every time a booster pack is open.
Yeah.
With an LCG, everybody opens the new pack, they put it in the thing, and then wait for a month and do it again. And that is actually fundamentally different than opening a random booster pack.
Yeah.
Where you might see things that you never even imagined. So there's just a lot of difference there, and I don't think we've fully appreciated and honed in on a lot of the finer points of this, but we really should. We should do a full cast
thing,
on
yeah, because it's a big question. I think we've talked about it a few times on the cast, but I'll kind of conclude with, I also still fundamentally believe that the competitive LCGs are not taking advantage of their format optimally. So there's a monthly release. In my opinion, the game should fundamentally change every month. So every month there's already a printout sheet that comes with every pack.
Yeah.
It's like every pack could tell you, here's the new thing that happened, whether it's thematically driven or story driven or whatever. And this means that these cards aren't playable, these packs are playable, this thing's illegal, this person's dead.
This person was kidnapped, taken
if
off.
You're playing, if you're playing Stark, you start with Eddard on the board.
Yeah.
Just fundamentally, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. But the short version is, the cooperative games take advantage of that fully. They tell chapters of a story that evolve over time. You can play it once, 2, 3, 4 times, put it away. You can wait 6 months, you can come back and still play all 6 chapters.
Yeah.
But in a game like a competitive LCG, if you miss 3 chapters and you've been away 3 months, you don't ever get that back.
Right.
You just buy 3 packs, put in the things you want, and you're there. And so just structurally, the format is very good for cooperative games, I think, because the cooperative games are naturally using that monthly thing.
Every release changes things drastically.
Whereas like an LCG, it's why are you doing it that way?
Yeah.
Why not just put out 3 bigger boxes a year instead of 1 pack a month?
Yeah. Where's the difference between that and an expandable board game, right?
Yeah.
Like where are you starting to draw those lines, and why does it matter?
And I think honestly, if I'm being quite frank, because if you look at what they're doing with L5R, which is just kind of going crazy, I'm not certain that FFG understands what an LCG is. Yeah. I don't think anybody does.
Well, we've had that issue when we're trying to define it, even on like the learning series. It's like, and an LCG means it's a living card game. It means cards, but living means not certain, really.
It means product comes out and you know what's in it.
Yeah. Which is like every board game release ever.
So it's just really. But I think to me the hallmark of an LCG used to be you get a monthly release, and if you lean into that, then you get a monthly release that changes the game every month, and it's living because it's constantly evolving. Yeah. Right. And not just because you're getting new cards. Like that's not enough.
Right. No, that's the key point. That's not enough. In Arkham, it is enough because my deck might never change due to player cards, and I still get a brand new experience every pack.
Every time. The actual game, the rules of the game that you're playing in the middle of the game, capital G game, change. Yeah. Because there's a new scenario that changes the rules.
So we need to go harder on living. That's what needs to happen. Living needs to be like, it needs to be dramatic every time that pack
I'm
hits.
serious. I would go crazy. You have no idea what I would do. This is another podcast. We'll get to that. You have no idea. I'm a wild man. I'll say that much when it comes to that. I think that there's also like a fear of like being too crazy with that, but I think you could go ham. All right, I'm just gonna move on to the next question.
I think we got to get out of here, Zach. We're about an hour in. Do you want to here? Let's do them quickly.
All right.
Chris F. I'll read because it's about you, which I always like doing on the cast. Team about a nice X-Wing article on the FF Games site, Zach Bunn. Where did that come from, by the way?
About 2 years ago is where it came from.
That's crazy.
I got tagged on Twitter and someone was like, "Hey, nice article," and I was like, "What?"
Whoa.
It was a first edition article that had been adapted for second edition.
Wow. How do you think changes to turrets in X-Wing 2.0 changes the turrets versus Arc Dodgers matchup now that you can potentially Arc Dodge a turret? And why does this mean Zach will never stop flying Vader?
Truth. There's never been a truer truth.
So tell me, second edition turrets. You got 20 seconds.
I think it makes it it's Arc Dodgers have a difficulty against turrets still, but not just infinite difficulty. So it's still a great matchup. I'm very excited. I think Arc Dodgers will be significantly more valuable in second edition, which makes me happy because that's how I like to play.
But Arc Dodging also is harder because the barrel roll is a little less squirrely.
Yeah.
So like you get that evening out where the turret's a little less adaptive.
Well, and action economy is a little less freely given. So like you can't just be a monster. Vader will be positionally very good, but at the same time, it's like even back when turrets didn't exist, it's not like Arc Dodgers would just win because they're squishy. Like if you do hit them, it is bad. And technically, with a turret that can move around, like you can predict where I'm going to go and make it very hard for me to not get hit by you. But yes, that does mean that I will continue playing Vader. I'm very excited. And I can't wait for the game to come.
All right, finally from Nick Bossio. Nick, we're going to have to get to your question last time. We kind of can nest it into the previous answer, but it's about LCGs as well. This is too much for us to dive into right now, but essentially Dice Masters is going with the LCG style model now. So things are just moving.
The turns have tightened.
And questions like, is an LCG really competitive without the collectible chase?
We'll come back.
Big questions, Nick. We'll get back to that. Let's try to get that next episode. Let's see if we can do that. So question, do you have a question for the folks out there? Do you want to go with the one you said earlier, which was why do you play
games? I mean,
or collectible games potentially? Or do you restrain your own collecting or buying habits by yourself or within a group to cultivate the amount of fun that you have?
Question one is that.
Is that?
Question two, I have a question I want to ask that's kind of a little related.
Hit me.
Which is, if you take a minute and step back and ask yourself, why you're playing these games, right? How would you approach the games that you're currently playing differently to maximize for fun instead of maximizing for like efficiency or best decks? And what does that look like? I'd love to know.
Wow. Lay down on the couch, close your eyes, and
That's
think about
right.
that one.
Until next time, keep playing.